the 1980s. Probably the best era for movies. I mean, The Empire Strikes Back, the best Star Wars movie, came out in the 80s. There was also classics like Aliens, Scarface, E.T., Blade Runner, Big, Die Hard, The Breakfast Club, Roadhouse, The Thing, The Shining, and so many other, not you, classics. But there was one genre in particular that thrived the most in the 80s, and that's of course the action movie genre, at least in my opinion. I mean, I know there is something for everyone in the 80s. Romance, horror, thriller, and so on. But while the movies from other genres have that 80s stamp and reflect that time, most of them could be made in any era. Scarface could have come out in any era, and we have seen similar movies even after that. Superman 2 had Superman throwing the S on his chest like it was a frisbee or something. Yeah, that's cheesy, but Batman and Robin pushed the cheese even further in the 90s. Way further.
Alright everyone, chill.
My point is that most of the 80s classics from the other genre could have been made in the 90s or the 2000s, but for some action movies, it's a little more complicated. Take First Blood for example. It got sequels. We got 2 more Rambo movies in 2008 and 2019, but it's no coincidence that Rambo peaked in popularity in the 80s. When Stallone decided to bring it back in 2008, the core fans showed up to the theater, but the movie failed to bring in a new audience. Actually, both 2008's Rambo and The Last Blood were significantly less successful than the original trilogy. But it's not every single action movie that belongs only to the 80s, because I don't think the modern Indiana Jones movies were failures only because of this particular reason. They are just not on par with the original trilogy. If they were, I'm sure the movies would have done better.
Are you crazy? That shit is so disrespectful.
Like we saw with Top Gun Maverick, a sequel to an 80s classic that managed to bring in a new audience to become one of the biggest post-pandemic releases. But with an 80s franchise like Rambo, the quality is not the primary reason these modern sequels underperform and never recapture the same hype from the past. No, the reason why Rambo, Commando, Predator are movies defined by their era is because of Yes, these are particular action movies using a specific formula that worked for their time. A shirtless, beefed up movie star killing a bunch of bad guys was the appeal. And the moment Hollywood moved on from that, it became automatically harder for a certain type of action movies to flourish. And don't quote me on that, but I think Die Hard might be the reason for that change. We went from to a regular guy with relationship problems. Normally, that's a recipe for disaster, but the moment the audience embraced that vision, it was over. Now people wanted relatable protagonists that didn't look like untouchable gods, especially given the fact that Lethal Weapon already came out a year before Die Hard and was also successful. I will always remember that era fondly, because that's what raised kids like me. Jean-Claude Van Damme, even when he was in a bad movie, we didn't really care. Dude looked like a total badass. He looked unbeatable. If there is anyone who mastered that era, it was probably Jean-Claude Van Damme. Dude had zero acting ability, 90% of his movies were crap, but all he needed was Okay, that was the last one, I promise. He carried what previously worked for people like Arnold or Stallone into the 90s after the success of Bloodsport in '88. Bloodsport made him a star in the style of action movies that was declining. So he became the king of B-movies instead. You know, the movies you play in the background while washing dishes. That's so cool! Wait, is that Bill Goldberg? So cool! And to be fair, he was good at it. But he was no match to the real king of B-movies. The greatest black, Chinese, Russian, Jamaican, Italian who ever lived. Mr. Steven Seagal himself.
I'm gonna take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank.
Seagal and Van Damme blew up around the same time, but while Van Damme took a lot of inspiration from the biggest movie stars of the time, while using his martial art experience to incorporate in his movies like Bruce Lee did before him, Seagal only focused on the latter part of that strategy, by purely relying on his experience in the art of Bushido.
Hold on a minute, that's not how it's called.
Hold on. I'm being told that it's actually called Aikido, a form of martial art that only works against unwanted handshakes.
Bruh.
But even those two were no match to the man who had been making shitty martial arts action movies since the 70s, Chuck Norris. Honestly, Chuck Norris's movies are nearly undescribable. The man had real star power, and that's pretty much the only thing that carried these movies. He had decent ones like The Delta Force or The Code of Silence, but whenever he wanted to get really cheesy, Chuck knew where to go. A movie like Invasion USA is one of those perfect examples of a movie that can only be watchable if Chuck Norris is the star. To me, he is the only reason I cannot even call it one of the worst movies of all time. And that pretty much summarizes the career of Chuck Norris. Karate skills, zero acting skills, incredible charisma, and abysmal scripts.
Wrong answer.
But what I really miss about the 1980s era is those movies that had the same name and were part of the same series of movies, but had absolutely nothing to do with each other. Like No Retreat, No Surrender, for example. The first one is the movie about a teenager who gets trained by the spirit of Bruce Lee to, well, for no apparent reason actually. Bruce Lee just thought he was a cool kid and decided to train him, and then at the end the kid just beats up a professional fighter in a brawl and the movie ends. Then No Retreat, No Surrender 2 takes us to Cambodia with a different set of characters, guns, explosions, with a bad guy that looks like he took Captain America's super soldier serum. Like, why the heck would you not just call it something else? Just because it's the same director doesn't mean it has to be the same name. That's like if Christopher Nolan named Inception Memento 6. It makes no freaking sense. And to make matters worse, they decide to make No Retreat, No Surrender 3 with a different director, but they brought back the same main actor just for him to play a totally different character. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this franchise? But when it comes to the 1980s, nothing is more notable than the rip-offs. You know, those C-level movies that are clearly trying to be like a certain movie. You know, like Mark and Me with E.T. for example. But here, I'm not just talking about the rip-off done for laughs.
I can't breathe in this thing!
No, in the 80s, we had movies that were actually trying not to make it that obvious that they were trying to be like another movie. And the best example of that is probably the movie Deadly Prey. Deadly Prey was my favorite movie as a kid. I didn't even know it was just a Commando ripoff, and that's because I actually liked it more than Commando. Yeah, I was a dumb kid. What do you want me to say? Deadly Prey is a B or maybe even a C-level movie that follows the character of Mike Denton. So in this movie, these mercenaries kidnap random people on the streets and bring them to the bushes so that their soldiers can track and kill them. They are not even doing it for sports like in the movie Hard Target. They are doing it to train their soldiers? Like, I don't know, that does not seem very smart to me. An highly trained soldier killing John the plumber in the bushes does literally nothing to improve his skills. It's like Lionel Messi training with 12-year-olds to improve his dribbling skills. That's completely stupid, I'm sorry. Anyway, unfortunately for them, one day they kidnap the wrong guy who happens to be Mike Denton, an incredibly skilled soldier who ends up killing them one by one. What always bothered me about this movie is that this guy's boss turned out to be the guy who trained Denton in the army.
I know this style. It's my style. Danton?
What are the odds that out of the thousands of people in the city, they kidnapped that one guy, their boss's former student who also happens to be the best soldier he's ever trained? I know it's a nitpick, but I hate coincidences in movies. Anyway, this movie is bad. I think that's pretty clear. And it aged horribly. The effects are terrible even for the time it came out. I mean, look at this shit.
Bruh.
Don't even get me started on the acting.
Don't kill me! Don't kill me! Don't kill me!
Okay. But for a dumb movie, it's got a pretty sad ending that I won't spoil just in case you want to check it out. Don't do that. Anyway, I think I've gone through everything I wanted to go through except one thing. Bro, what happened to ninja movies? Remember that guy with the blue eyes from American Ninja? I used to watch his movies religiously as a kid. Then there was like an explosion of ninja movies between the late 80s and the early 90s. Like Americans just became obsessed with ninjas and started making a bunch of movies about them. And then one day they just vanished. But why? Nah, that's a topic for another day. Alright, I'm done. Bye.
Peace out!